Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So this week I want to talk to you guys about probably the most important skill that you can learn in the golf swing, and that's your ability to move your weight forward and your hips forward. Now the reason why this movement is so crucial to learn is because it helps you with so many things at once. It can help you with low point control, the quality of your contact, distance, and can even control the direction that you're swinging the club. Okay, so I've got four balls in front of me here. I put an alignment stick behind them, about a club head width behind. I'm pretty confident that I can demonstrate hitting these four balls without touching this alignment stick, just because I know how to shift my weight towards a target. I know how to move my hips towards a target. This is just to show you why it's so important and abilities that you'll have if you're able to master this correctly. So just bear with me. I'm standing past the mat because of the camera, but here we go. That just shows you the the importance of your ability to get the weight and hips moving forward. It's going to really improve or allow you to control where you're hitting the ground or where you're bottoming out in the swing. And I tell a lot of the beginners that come in for lessons here that that's really the first thing that you're going to want to learn is to control where you're striking the ground, because if you can't do that, it's very, very hard or discouraging to play this game. So it's important to understand that your ability to strike the ground relatively in the same spot will be directly correlated to your handicap. So the higher handicap players will tend to have the worst control of where they hit the ground. So they hit the ground heavy, they'll miss the ground completely, and maybe occasionally have a good strike. Whereas the better players can almost always hit the same spot on the ground and make a lot more consistent contact. We talked about having the control of where the longest point in the swing is, right? That's when the lead arm and the shaft form a straight line, okay? Now, if I were to do this demonstration with my weight on my right leg or trail leg, it'll be very, very difficult for me to do it. So I'm just going to hit a standard shot for you guys first with the GC quad. We'll go over the numbers, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit another shot with kind of my weight staying on my trail leg, and then we'll compare the differences. Okay, so here's a standard shot with my 7-iron. Okay, so the path there was 3.1 into out. The angle of attack 5.4 down. Okay, now I'm going to hit another shot with most of my weight on my trail leg, and we'll kind of see the differences. All right, so even though that that was fairly acceptable, right? Started left, maybe faded back, but the path number 4.1 out to in. Okay, so now I went over and across that shot. I still hit down on it, but not nearly as much. Now the reason why I hit down on it was because I went over the top, and I'll explain how that works in just a second. But the biggest differences is just those two numbers that I wanted to show you guys is the difference in path and angle of attack. So when you have your weight more forward and your hips moving more forward, you can actually hit more downwards on it. So you can start to compress the ball a bit better. Also, that's going to encourage you to move the low point further forward or further ahead. Now, when you have the weight and your hips kind of more on the trail side or behind the golf ball, in order for you to strike the golf ball, if you were to swing it in to out with your weight and everything behind the ball, you would hit the ground so far behind it. So you actually have to get the shaft of the club coming in more steep, and the only way for you to do that is to throw the club outside and cut across the golf ball like that. So that's going to also allow you to bring the low point closer to the golf ball. But we definitely don't want that, because that's going to typically create a huge slice. Now, there was a study conducted by Golf Tech, and they measured, players of all levels, higher handicap players, all the way up to very, very low handicap players, and they found out that the worst players have their hip and their weight more behind the golf ball or furthest away from the target, whereas the better the player gets, the more their weight is forward and the more their hips are forward. So the average kind of at the top is around 1.6 inches towards the target, whereas the worst players read the most away, kind of around 2.5 or more. And even at impact, the hips are reading at 1.6 inches towards the target. And again, whereas the worst players or the higher handicap players are the most away. I'm going to go over some common mistakes that I see with a lot of people that come in here, and just show you some ways that you can encourage more weight left and more hips towards the target. So almost every player that has this issue demonstrates the same mistakes, both at the setup, the backswing, and even into the follow through. So at address, the first mistake that I always see is that if you were to reference the belt or kind of the center of your hip or the buttons of the shirt, kind of the center of the shoulders, they always set up kind of more behind the golf ball at address. So they have slightly more weight on their trail leg. Okay. Now, if you're doing that, then obviously that's going to encourage more weight shift off the golf ball. And unless you recover or actually shift your weight enough into the lead side, then most likely you're going to hit the ground first, and all these sorts of things are going to happen. So what I encourage everyone to do is we do want the weight just ever so slightly more on the lead side. So just enough to get those centers, right? The center of the shoulder, center of the hip, more so on top of the golf ball. Even just slightly ahead of it is okay. You can see that I'm putting, to me, what I feel like is about 60%, 55% of my weight on my lead side. Now, if you are someone that has, the centers more behind it, it may feel more like 80% of your weight on the lead side. Now, even though it feels really, really excessive to you, it probably doesn't even look like that, okay? But you definitely want to reference kind of where your belt and your buttons of your shirt are at address there. Now, the second mistake that I see is kind of in the backswing where people really, really get a lot of lateral movement to the right or into their trail leg. And again, I really don't want to see too much of that. I don't mind maybe, just a little bit, okay? But typically what happens with people who have so much lateral movement is that they have a harder time, again, just bringing everything back into the right position on the way down. So unless you're really good at recovering and getting your weight kind of into your lead side, then I would encourage that from your starting position with your centers on top of the golf ball or just slightly in front of it, that you learn to kind of turn your centers on top of each other without any lateral movement off the ball. Okay, so if you can do that, then you'll really, really increase your chances of being able to stay in position or even get your hips going more forward. And that's going to get the low point further in front of the golf ball most of the time. Now, if you were a player that did move your weight into your trail leg, then turning around your center is going to feel as though, 60 to 80% of your weight stays on your left foot. And it may even feel like you're pivoting more so around your lead leg as to against your trail leg. Now, the third mistake happens kind of more so in the fall through or in the downswing, but players who initially start and try to put more weight on the lead side, when they feel really excessive amount of weight on the lead side and they make their backswing and they come into the downswing, what they do typically is they move their hip backwards because it just feels awkward to them at the beginning. So with most of their weight feeling on the lead side, they come in, hips move backwards, okay, and again they hit the shot with the hips behind the golf ball. So what you want to do instead is, even though your centers are kind of feeling a lot more forward, weight's a lot more forward, you want to keep your hips moving more to the left, but you want to get your head to stay behind the golf ball and you want your upper body to extend backwards. Okay, so you don't want to move the hip backwards at any point. You always want it staying centered, if not slightly moving towards the target in the backswing and moving more towards the target, but you want your upper body to kind of be more away from the target. So you're always going to keep your hips in front of your shoulders at all times. Again, what you can do is with your hip and everything forward, try to hit the ball and keep your hip going forward and try to make this shape in the body. Okay, it'll feel as though your head moves backwards as your hips move forward. Okay, so it's going to feel as though your hips move forward as your head kind of moves back and chest gets up. So one of my favorite drills I like to do with some of my players is to just hold a noodle or just some sort of object kind of on the lead side of their head, right, as they're setting up, kind of like that. Now I just have a device on the ground, but you can have someone hold it for you, And as you take a shot, what you want to do is after you hit, you want to focus on keeping your head behind that noodle or behind that object, and you want to make sure that your weight and your hips go past or beyond the object. Okay, so it'll look something like this. So doing this drill will kind of help you feel out what it's like to get your hips moving in front of your shoulders, okay, and to get that extension in the body, and to keep your balance by kind of having the weight forward, and your head behind the golf ball.